deal hasn't been done yet, but Kellen Moore is the presumed favorite to become the next head coach of the Saints. Who would be on his staff, and would he keep Derek Carr as his quarterback? We'll talk about that right here on the Straight Up Saints podcast.
You're listening to the Straight Up Saints podcast.
What is up, Who Dat Nation? Welcome inside another edition of the Straight Up Saints podcast. I'm your host, Chris Rosvoglu, and as always, the Straight Up Saints podcast is brought to you by Scott Fickner. Injury lawyers. Been injured in any kind of accident, car, truck, 18-wheeler, or hurt offshore. Scott Fickner handles it all. You give him a call at 504-500-1111 for a free consultation. They'll always fight for the win. Hope you guys are having a great Monday. The Super Bowl is finally here, just 6 days away from going down at the Caesars Superdome in New Orleans. Going to be exciting, but to see the Chiefs and the Eagles, and a little bit more interesting for the Saints because Kellen Moore will be running the Eagles offense, and he is expected to become the next head coach of the Saints. And bearing an utter catastrophe, and honestly, when you look at the headlines this morning, maybe we're getting there. The Saints maybe have their next head coach in Kellen Moore. He's already been trying to recruit a possible staff. He's been doing his homework. They're going to meet a third time once the Super Bowl wraps up. It should be done fairly soon. As always, guys, if you are enjoying our content here at Booker Media, put your comments in. I'll get them in just a little bit. I see Jerry here. Good morning, Jerry. And Shaqzilla. What's going on, Shaqzilla? Hope you guys are doing well. We'll jump into it. Let's talk about Kellen Moore. Let's talk about his staff, what it could look like. It's going to be fascinating because when you get to this stage of the offseason, a lot of the potential candidates are off the board. You know, we've seen a lot of veteran coaches pick up premier jobs around the league, whether it is a Matt Eberflus going to be the DC of the Cowboys, whether it is a Jeff Ulbrich becoming the DC of the Falcons, Robert Saleh going back to 49ers. A lot of your prime candidates in that regard, they have found jobs, and that is the downside to being the last team to hire. You are kind of left with whatever's out there. Like, there aren't as many options. That said, I think there are two guys that, in my opinion, are, I don't want to say certainties, but feel like very, very good bets to be on the staff of the New Orleans Saints if Kellen Moore gets the job. So let's start off with the first one. This one, in my opinion, is the biggest no-brainer. It's Doug Nussmeier. I think Doug, look at the history. There is the ties to Louisiana there, obviously, and New Orleans. And I think if you look at his journey so far, he's been the Eagles quarterback coach right now with Kellen Moore as the OC. He was with the Chargers, similar role when Kellen Moore was the OC. And then prior to that, if you take out the LA Chargers quarterback coach job, the Eagles quarterback coach job, was with the Cowboys. He was the tight ends coach before he became the quarterback coach under Kellen Moore, who again was the OC. So all he knows is being the quarterback coach, really, for Kellen Moore. So I believe that would continue with a better role. Maybe his title becomes OC. Kellen still calls the plays, and you go from there. But I think Doug Nussmeier is kind of a no-brainer. He played for the Saints, so that feels like a homecoming. But B, there is the ties to Kellen Moore are really, really there. And I believe this is a no-brainer for a guy that will be on his staff. So offensively, you do have a guy there that can be your OC in Doug Nussmeier. I also think if you're going to think about possible OC jobs, I don't know if he would go this route, but Todd Downing, former Lions quarterback coach, when Kellen Moore was on the roster. So when Kellen Moore was there as the actual backup quarterback, of course, to Matt Stafford, you had Todd Downing on the staff. Todd Downing, since then, he's been the OC of the Titans. He's been the pass game coordinator for the Jets. He's had a bunch of jobs. I don't know if he would get an OC job, but maybe if you're trying to add some experience to your coaching staff, maybe they'll go there with Todd Downing. So that's another offensive name that I look at. The other certainty, obviously I mentioned the first one being a certainty. I think Brandon Staley, the former Los Angeles Chargers coach, I feel like there is a very, very, very good chance he ends up joining the Saints staff. A, there are not a lot of good options out there. And B, man, there is experience, at least, at being a defensive coordinator. It was one season with the Rams, which then led him to getting the Chargers job, but there's history with Kellen Moore. He's been a defensive coordinator before. I can see Brandon Staley being the defensive coordinator for the Saints. Might not be the most appealing option, but there aren't a lot of options out there, and there is a clear connection there between Kellen Moore and Brandon Staley. So we'll see what happens there. But I would say this. When Clayton Adams, the former O-line coach for the Cardinals, is now the OC of the Cowboys, when it gets reported last Friday that Kellen Moore is doing his recruiting for his Saints staff, and that's a guy he was looking at, I would say pay very close attention to teams that run the football heavy. What's their O-line? What's their scheme like? And going from there, because I think Kellen Moore is obviously going to try to implement a very run-heavy offense for the Saints. So it's going to be interesting to see how it goes down, but I think that's going to be what you should look at. But Todd Downing, a possible name. The two definites, though, Doug Nussmeier and Brandon Staley. I think those are two guys that will join Kellen Moore's staff. So see a lot of comments starting to file up here. I know you guys are very, very frustrated with the current state of the Saints, considering the scandal that they're involved in. And I'll get to that. We can get to that in the fan Q&A in about, let's call it 5 minutes from now. So if you guys have any questions, make sure to dump them in, any comments. I will get to every single one. And as always, guys, if you are enjoying it, please leave a like. It helps out the channel. So let's keep it rolling. We talked about who can be on Kellen Moore's staff. Who the hell is going to be the quarterback? That is a question that needs to be asked. And I can't help but wonder if Derek Carr's days in New Orleans finally are numbered. I think there's a lot of reasons to think about it, but let's start off with what we know. It was reported last week that Kellen Moore, if he was hesitant about the Saints' job, because he don't love the quarterback situation, and I can't blame him. Derek Carr, vet, not really a face of the franchise type guy. He's got 2 years left on his deal. He's been injured in New Orleans. That's not a great situation. And then behind him, it's Jake Haener, who frankly looked terrible in the one game he played in, and Spencer Rattler, who's had nice moments, but he's an unknown. You don't really know Spencer Rattler's going to be anything. He could end up being the next Sam Howell. Some nice spot starts, and then that's about it. So we'll see what happens there, but there is a little concern. And I think for Kellen Moore, if you look at the history of who he's worked with so far, he's worked with Dak Prescott, who at the time was a very mobile quarterback. Justin Herbert, who I wouldn't say is super mobile, but Justin Herbert's a pretty good athlete. And then Jalen Hurts, who obviously out of the three is the best athlete from the bunch. He has worked with quarterbacks who have that ability to be pretty athletic with their legs. Derek Carr, I don't think is the worst athlete in the world, obviously, but that is not something he's going to bring to the table. And I do wonder if Kellen Moore, seeing the way his offense has thrived in Philly, if he wants to go that route of getting a more mobile quarterback to have someone operate his system. And if that's the case, Derek Carr is not cut out for the job. But I also think if you just look at Derek Carr's structure right now with his contract, it's a little complicated. If it wasn't complicated, I think Derek Carr would be the easiest pick to say, you're cut as soon as the offseason fully begins, the new year begins. Because A, Derek Carr's got $30 million for next year's salary, or this year's salary, I keep forgetting it's 2025, that becomes guaranteed on the third day of the new league year. So on the third day of the new league year, if he's still on the Saints roster, they owe him $30 million guaranteed. So that is a concern for the Saints. If you don't want to keep him, you want to make a decision before then. But pre-June 1st, you're gaining no money, no cap savings from cutting him, and you're taking on pretty much a $40 million dead cap, If you trade him pre-June 1st, you're still taking on a shit ton of dead cap. Don't get me wrong. But at least you are getting $11 million in savings. It's a little bit easier on the team. It's a little bit easier. And then if it's post-June 1st, you obviously got to break up the cap. You'd have $30 million in cap savings for the year if you do post-June 1st, which sounds intriguing, but post-June 1st, you're really just signing your draft class at that point. But you do only have $21 million in dead cap for 2025, and then about $29 million in dead cap for 2026. So you break up the number. Maybe it's a little easier to swallow. That's kind of what Denver's done the last year with Russell Wilson, and now this year with Russell Wilson's contract. So you can go that route. The Broncos just proved you can cut an expensive quarterback if you're going younger and cheaper at that position and get away with it. Is it ideal in today's NFL? No. You want kind of what the Commanders have, where Jaden Daniels on a rookie salary, and they're going to spend a lot of money this offseason. The Patriots, Drake May on a rookie salary, they're going to spend a lot of money. The 49ers pretty much have had Brock Purdy on a rookie salary. They've spent a lot of money. The Eagles, prior to giving Jalen Hurts that big contract, spent a lot of money around him because you have him on a rookie deal. So that is usually the way to go. But the Saints could, if they really want to, cut Derek Carr, eat that money, and get younger at the quarterback position. What I will say about Kellen Moore, though, if you just look at his offenses, they are pretty adaptable. While they've been run-heavy this year, they're second in the league in rush yards, they have been, if you just look at his history, he's been able to go in the top half of passing yards and just being an important offense and explosive from the pass game, whether it was Dallas or even LA being middling, right? So for LA, the 1 year he was there, they were 13th in passing yards, 25th in rushing. Not ideal, but you can see the lean towards the passing. If you go to 2021 in Dallas, that's probably the pinnacle of Kellen Moore's tenure in terms of stats. They were second in passing yards, ninth in rushing yards. That gets you to first overall in the league total, first in points as well. That's probably the most prolific. But I think what he's done this year with Philly is the most interesting to me because that might be something he has to do with New Orleans, assuming he's the next head coach. Philly is not an explosive pass team, right? Right now, if you just look at the numbers, they're 29th in passing yards. And there's so many games where you look at the box score and Jalen Hurts had under 200 yards. It just doesn't look aesthetically pleasing. But goddamn, they run you over. They're second in rushing yards. Saquon has been outstanding. They've done a great job of opening up lanes in the run game. And I think Kellen Moore has done a really good job of being able to say, hey, play to your personnel. So if he goes to the Saints, you look at what they have. If he loves what he's got in Fuaga, McCoy, maybe Penning as a run blocker, there might be that shift towards being a run team, just like he's been with Philly so far. So I'm not worried about that part. I think he is in terms of just being a play caller, I think he is an adaptable play caller. The biggest question will always be leader of men, but who is going to be his quarterback is something that I can't help but wonder. And I just believe, and maybe I'm just misled on this. I think if Kellen Moore gets the job, Derek Carr is done. I kind of think that's how it goes. I think Derek Carr gets cut. I think he ends up elsewhere. And mind you, this is a player who's already said, and I don't blame him, that he's not going to take a pay cut. So what's the easiest thing to do? Just flat out cut the guy is probably where we're heading. So I believe Kellen Moore takes the Saints job knowing that if he wants to, he can move off of Derek Carr. Who would he go after? I'm sure a bunch of quarterbacks in the draft will be mentioned. Don't see the Saints being a player in free agency for an expensive quarterback, so I think we could wipe kind of that possibility off the board. But I just don't see a world where they bring in Kellen Moore and say, hey, you got to start Derek Carr because that's who we want. Doesn't mean Derek Carr is not the best option from a talent standpoint at the moment. He just doesn't fit the Saints timeline. And frankly, if you look at the quarterbacks that Kellen Moore's worked with, you haven't fit that description either for the Saints. So we'll see what happens there with Kellen Moore and Derek Carr. I think we're heading towards Kellen Moore getting him out of there. That's just kind of where I'm at. I think he's going to get Derek Carr out, and the Saints are going to start anew at quarterback, which I'm sure some fans would be happy about. Speaking of the fans, let's get into our fan Q&A presented by Sunshine, your hometown John Deere. Nothing runs like a deer. We'll see what everything's got in the comment section. I'm sure you guys are going to talk about this scandal going on, and I understand it. It's the news of the day. When you wake up on a Monday morning, that's not what you want to see. I'll tell you that much. We're going to start off welcoming Chris Covington, becoming a YouTube member for Boot Crew Media. Really, really appreciate the support, Chris. Thank you so much for joining. Jerry saying good morning. What's going on, Jerry? Asked, is Mickey Loomis fired yet? Unfortunately for you, Jerry, he's not. He's not fired yet. That has not happened. And we'll see. I don't think that's coming anytime soon. I really don't. I think Kellen Moore, if that hire goes and just becomes an abomination and the Saints fail, then yeah, I believe that is where you'll get to that point where Mickey Loomis is fired. But I don't think it's going to be because of the scandal, no matter how bad it is. Jack says, I'd enjoy Kellen Moore as head coach, but Mickey being the GM still ruins everyone morale-wise. Or moral-wise, actually, you put down. I'm guessing you meant morale-wise, but if you look at the stories today, maybe moral-wise, it is, because Saints' morals are in question after the scandal that came out today. But I get it. I want to be excited about the Kellen Moore hire, assuming it happens, because I think us Saints fans, it's time to get back to being excited about the product on the field. We've been so frustrated with the coaching staff. We've been so frustrated with the GM. We've been so frustrated with the owner. We've been frustrated with the roster. It's time to get a little bit excited. And in this situation, get excited about a coach who we have seen have a lot of success in Philadelphia. Now, Philadelphia's got a much better roster. They're a better organization. But it's time for us to get excited about that, for sure. Jerry says, that's why Mickey Loomis needs to be fired. I'm tired of the circus. I get it. Look, I get it. And you guys know where I stand on this. I think Mickey Loomis is a very, very, very bad GM at this stage in his career. I think that he's incredibly stubborn, doesn't want to view the Saints the way they're supposed to be viewed, which is a rebuilding team. And I think that probably sinks them faster than it should. But I just don't think they're going to cut him right now and cut bait with him. I just don't see how they move on from him. I think they're committed to this. And I think if this search goes poorly, which it already has in terms of the way the search is played out, but if the hire goes poorly and Kellen Moore isn't the right guy and this doesn't work out, I do believe deep down he's going to get fired. But I do think it has to play out, and I think this cycle has to go. and we'll go from there. Justin Get Me Cash for the super chat. Thank you so much for the support. Says Gail needs to sell the team. I think there's going to be some growing pressure now. I think, look, this scandal wasn't new, by the way. This was not new. We knew about this a couple of years ago, about what the Saints did with kind of shielding the church amidst sexual abuse allegations. We knew this. This came out. I would say in this particular situation, this is more emails coming out, so you have more of the extent of what they did. So now you have a little bit more to that background. But this is not new news. But in a Super Bowl week, when your city is the host city of the Super Bowl, for this story to drop, it's as bad as it gets. It's a bad look on the organization. It's a questionable, more than questionable, damning look at your morals. And I do wonder if there will be growing pressure for them to sell. Now, it doesn't mean they will sell, but this is how stuff starts. I'm not going to compare it's apples to oranges, but the Washington Commanders, before they ended up selling, stuff starts to mount with Dan Snyder, and you see the behavior behind the scenes. And again, apples to oranges, what Dan Snyder did and what the Saints have done are two different situations, both wrong, but shit starts to mount in the NFL. And I do wonder if we get to that point where eventually they go. But, you know, for people who want them to sell right now and want Loomis gone, unfortunately, I think you're going to have to wait. Parker says, damn, I'd be a better GM. Sure, a lot of Saints fans feel that way. Jay says, do you think Kellen Moore still takes the job with the church scandal? I do, because this is not new news. This is not breaking news in terms of this is the first time we're hearing about this. I think, if anything, it's just, again, another terrible look on the organization, but I feel this way about Kellen Moore. I think he's in a situation where he's not guaranteed another head coaching job, at least offered on his doorstep. And the reason I feel that way is the way the Eagles are built. It's kind of year to year, circumstantial of what they're going to be. Joe Brady can go back to the Bills because Joe Brady's got Josh Allen. And as long as he's got Josh Allen as his quarterback, his offense is going to be good. That's the truth of the matter. The Eagles, unfortunately, Jalen Hurts has been a little inconsistent. Saquon Barkley's having the year of his life, and he is that damn good. But Saquon plays a taxing position from a physical toll. Is Saquon next year, and I don't want this because I love watching Saquon Barkley. He's such a great player. Is Saquon, God forbid, misses 5 games, 6 games due to injury, right? And the Eagles offense takes a hit, and they have to become more pass heavy, and all of a sudden they don't look good. That's going to hurt Kellen Moore. And we just saw Bobby Slowick last year be a head coaching candidate with the Texans. Texans get banged up on offense. CJ Stroud regresses a little bit, and Bobby Slowick gets fired a year after getting head coaching interviews. So not everyone is going to be Ben Johnson, where the personnel is there and you're a really good play caller, and you know that you'll have enough talent that you're going to get another offer on your doorstep. I can't say Kellen Moore will, because it's just the way the NFL goes, right? We've seen the Super Bowl hangover before, whether it's the winner or the loser, okay, unless you're the Chiefs. And I can see, Kellen Moore returning to the Eagles, them not having as good of a year, and all of a sudden you get left wondering, man, did I miss my opportunity to become a head coach? So I don't believe the scandal is going to hurt the Saints in terms of Kellen Moore getting the job. I still believe he takes the job. Maybe that's me being naive, but it's a shit look for the organization. I can't deny that. It's a horrible look for the organization. There's no denying it. Jack says somehow the Mavs GM is worse than Mickey. I'm going to be honest, guys. I know it's called Straight Up Saints. So we're going to be talking Saints and mostly and almost all the time Saints. On Saturday night, I could not believe my phone when I saw that trade. I could not believe my phone. I looked at it 50 times and I'm like, there's no fucking way that the Mavericks traded Luka Doncic. And it's tough to really compare what an equal trade would look like in the NFL. But to move on from a 25-year-old superstar with generational talent for Anthony Davis, who is a great player, but older, broken down, it makes no fucking sense. And then to not field that player in a sense of, okay, if you're going to trade him, which I disagree with wholeheartedly, I don't think you ever trade Luka Doncic. You keep him on your roster till the wheels fall off that man. To not have a bidding war kind of breakout is negligence. So we'll see. We'll see if Mickey Loomis can somehow be worse than the Mavs GM. But right now, Mavs GM, and then the press conference, he had an abomination. Jerry G says, yes, Carr is done in NOLA. We'll see. I kind of feel like that's going to happen, but we'll see. Jack says, would you take a flyer on a quarterback in free agency for a 1-year deal, low money, low risk? If you feel like, if you feel like money-wise it's possible, sure. I know a lot of Saints fans have been saying Justin Fields. I don't know. I think that at this point, you're probably looking at, drafting a quarterback maybe, but we'll see. I saw someone mention, I forgot which analyst mentioned Sam Darnold, and I was like, he's expensive. That's not happening. So we could rule that one out. But would you take a flyer? I mean, sure. I think I'd rather them just maybe draft a guy if that was the case. But yeah, it's possible for them to take a flyer. I don't think that they'd be against it. I think it comes down to money. How much is going to cost? If it's a $10 million flyer, I think you're ruling it out. They don't really have the funds for that. Trey Gibbs says, as he talked about the gross ass news that broke this morning, in and out, right? Like well, probably not the best phrase for me to use in that question. Look, when you guys bring it up, I'll gladly address it. I think this is a horrible situation for the Saints. I think when it broke a couple years ago, the first time when we found out about what they were doing for the church, kind of covering up, I believe I went very, very deep on why I was disgusted by it. I'm still disgusted by it. I just think as an organization, it makes zero sense to get involved in something of that nature. There's no benefit to it, but to actually try to either hand out advice or soften the blow from a media perspective of a scandal that disgusting and think that it's okay to get involved and be dumb enough to let your company emails kind of fly off over there. It's stupid. It's wrong. It's disgusting. It's as bad as it gets. I'm not as emotionally charged to speak about it today because we knew this was going on, right? If this just came out of nowhere, I think my reaction would be a little bit different. There'd be a little bit more kind of raw shock to my expression. But unfortunately, we've known about this. We've known the Saints have operated in this manner. It's horrible that they have, but it's the truth. Nope, Carr 2027. I think Carr will be gone. Chipotle, Carr's first time, classic. Yeah, for that to be your first meal in New Orleans is kind of hilarious. Because Walter brought it up, genuinely thinking Derek Carr eating Chipotle's first spot is the reason people really hate him because he just genuinely ain't bad. He's not a bad quarterback. I've said this multiple times. Derek Carr really isn't a bad quarterback. I think, though, for him, he just doesn't fit the timeline. If the Saints had a win now roster and I felt like, hey, decent quarterback play gets them to 11-6, let's roll this thing, Like, if you had a Lions roster with Derek Carr, you could probably still be successful. And now I think Jared Goff's a much better quarterback than Derek Carr, but you could still be successful. That could be a playoff team. He doesn't fit the timeline for the Saints right now, in my opinion. I just don't see it. Jack says getting rid of Carr is something that is inevitable. May as well do it as soon as possible. Yeah, the money problem is what makes it complicated. He's not as easy as just cutting him and moving on. But look, the Broncos took on about $80 million in dead cap to get rid of Russell Wilson. The Saints would have to take on $50 million in dead cap to get rid of Derek Carr. So it can be done, but you got to have the plan in place. Broncos obviously did. Got rid of Russell Wilson, drafted Bo Nix. Obviously, that's turned out for the better. The Saints, what would be your plan? If you move on from Derek Carr, what are you going to do at quarterback? I think that's the question. Whether it is starting a Spencer Rattler or going elsewhere, what are you going to do? I think that's what I'm kind of hung up on because I don't know where they'll go yet. Pelicans Noah says Derek Carbage, time to go. Jerry says broken down Carr ready, needs to go. Kevin says Mickey Loomis and Carr both need to be let go. Yeah, I mean, one of them will be, the other not yet. I'm telling you guys, I do think Mickey Loomis's leash is shorter than fans think, though. I think some fans believe he's going to be with his organization until the end of time. I don't feel that way. I don't. I believe Mickey's got to get this thing right or he's gone. And you can make an argument that he shouldn't even be allowed to get this thing right because he just butchered the last hire. And I would agree with you guys because when you butcher the hires and you butcher the draft picks and you butcher the free agent signings, it falls on the same guy. He's in charge of all these decisions. But they're giving him another go around. He will not get a third, though. He will not get a third, in my opinion. Jack says, who do you want to lose more, the Eagles or the Chiefs? That's a great question. Probably the Eagles. Look, I don't like the Kansas City Chiefs. I don't. I think they're kind of insufferable, but I grew up in New York. I cannot, under any circumstance, want Philadelphia to be good. Nick Sirianni kind of annoys the hell out of me. So, yeah, CJ Gardner-Johnson's kind of annoying. So, I can't root for Philly. Love Saquon. Love what he's done. I got no problem with Jalen Hurts. He's a dog, but look, the Chiefs at the end of the day are going to keep winning anyway. I've already seen them win 3 times in my life. They win a 4th. What's it going to do? It's not a big deal for me at this point, you know? Wesley says, I wonder if they'll want to announce this ASAP to get ahead of any pending sanctions by the NFL. Oh, is this in regards to the scandal? Yeah, look, I don't know what they could do at this point. I think the NFL is going to continue doing their investigation. I think all you can do as the Saints right now is A, stay silent, and B, stop freaking, meddling with the church. I think that's what you got to stop doing. Matt says, my apologies if you've answered this already, but do you think these negative ethical practices will sway Kellen's decisions? I probably don't. Maybe I'm being naive. I really don't, though, because I think it comes back to what I said. If you're Kellen Moore, your stock has never been higher. It has never been higher. You're running an offensive juggernaut right now in Philly. You're in the Super Bowl. You're meeting for a 3rd time with this team. I think he's going to be the head coach. I don't think this is going to affect him, especially because it's been out there before. The Saints' horrible past with the church has been out there. So I do believe he will be back. We'll be on the Saints. Montauk says, auction off that car and send it to the scrap heap. Kevin says, Mrs. Benson and Mickey Loomis are joined at the hip. Again, I felt that way until this past season. When Gail goes over the top and fires Dennis Allen pretty much, when Mickey doesn't want him fired because she spoke to the players behind the scenes, I think there is pressure there. And the Saints haven't drafted well and they haven't made the right free agency decisions. I believe if he doesn't get this hire right, I think Mickey will be gone. But you know what? After today, with the reports we had, who knows? Maybe Gail will be gone in a couple years too. Margaret says, I don't see this team going anywhere until Loomis is gone. I tend to agree with that. Japanese Hercules says, Derek has that DA stink. Get him out of here. I mean, he was his quarterback, so shouldn't he leave with him? Matthew says, it's time for a massive reset from ownership on down for both organizations. We need a fresh start. I do agree with that. Will it happen? I don't know. Do I agree with it? Yeah. Are we surprised that an organization that donated a Project 2025 is involved in another scandal? I can't speak on the first one. I don't know if that's the case. I do think people were talking about maybe Gail being at the inauguration. I guess it was an Instagram post that went up. I don't know. I'm not in the loop as much when it comes to Instagram stuff, but am I surprised the Saints are involved in this scandal? No, because they've been involved in this scandal for years now. I still don't understand I get people are faithful and people have religious beliefs, and I get that. I don't understand why you would get involved in this. I just don't. Do you buy into the reports that the Saints believe Spencer Rattler is the future? I don't fully buy into that. Do I think they could start him next year? Absolutely. Yeah, I think so. And honestly, I'm not opposed to them starting Spencer Rattler for a whole year with Kellen Moore being the coach, running that system. But I don't know, man. I just think that the Saints are going to evaluate all options. They're not married to the idea of Spencer Rattler being the starter for the 2025 season. I don't think it's a bad idea, though. He's cheap. He's got potential. You don't really know the full extent of what he can be, but there's no guarantee that happens. Alpha Sports says DC's untradeable. I mean, I would say so. I don't think anyone's trading for him because I think it always comes down to this logic, right? If you don't get a trade for someone, if you're going to cut someone, if you can't trade them, then why would someone actually trade for them? Unless they feel like there's no shot we can sign this guy, then fine. But if not, and you feel like you can court them in free agency and you can get them to go around, you're just going to wait for them to just lose out on suitors and cut the guy, and then you don't have to trade anything. It's kind of what happened with the Raiders with Derek Carr. So I believe Carr, if he hits the market, it'll be via cut, not by trade. Alpha says Moore got the job because he agreed to keep DC for this season. We do not know that. I'm not trying to be... Now, I might not know that, he got the job because he wants Derek Carr out. But when there are rumblings about Kellen Moore not liking the quarterback situation, I believe there is a chance that Derek Carr will be gone. And again, he does not fit the timeline for this team. He just doesn't. Cody says, do you buy into the Saints drafting Kyle McCord? I think that when Dan Orlovsky puts that out there, I don't think he puts it out there for no reason. Now, do I think the Saints will prioritize drafting Kyle McCord? Probably not. I think they have way bigger needs. I don't think Kyle McCord is necessarily a priority. Although the good thing is you won't have to worry about using an expensive pick on him because he's not going in the first round, obviously, despite how well he played at Syracuse this past season. Dan Orlovsky was teammates with Kellen Moore. Darren Orlovsky and Kellen Moore text pretty often. He talked about how he mentioned he picked the Rams to beat the Eagles in the divisional round. And after the Eagles beat the Rams, he said Kellen Moore was texting him, like joking around how his pick inspired him. So if he puts it out there, I think there's some validity to it, but I don't know for sure because, hey, we're still over 2 months away from the draft, and we got to see how the Saints build out their roster. What they do, though, at the quarterback situation will be telling. We'll know whether or not they want to draft a guy, obviously. Swamp Saints 57 says, do you think Moore will come in and clean house immediately, or will the organization give him a few years of grace? They can't fully clean house anyway right now because of the way they're built. So I think it's kind of, the Saints are never going to be able to just completely slam the rebuild button because the way the contracts are set up, they can't just cut guys to save money. They either got to start restructuring a little bit more or go from there or hope that guys start retiring. But I think there will be grace. I think the Saints, they got to know if you hire Kellen Moore, first-year head coach, in his mid-30s, hasn't done this before, there's got to be a grace period. And I think there will be. But I don't think they'll be able to just clean house completely. There will be things that you got to change, right? How does he want to address the physical aspect of it, right? Because I remember Darren Rizzi came in as the interim, and the first thing he wanted to do was figure out, hey, why are we having all these soft tissue injuries? So maybe Kellen will address that part. Maybe there's a change to the training staff he wants. Obviously, he's going to bring in his own coaching staff. So that'll be a little bit of a reset. But roster-wise, they really can't just start letting go of guys. They can't. So we'll see what they do. But the Saints aren't in that position right now to just let go of guys. That's why I said before, one of you guys asked whether or not they could take a flyer on a quarterback. I don't think they could take a flyer on a quarterback via free agency because they're not going to have the funds. So that's why starting Spencer Rattler might make sense, or drafting a quarterback and starting that quarterback might make sense from a money standpoint. But they won't be able to do a full reset. Trey says, with the rumors that the front office loves Rattler, who do you think that is? I mean, wouldn't be surprised if it's guys like Jeff Ireland. Ziegler's no longer there, but maybe he was a guy that felt like Spencer Rattler could have been the guy. I'm sure, I mean, Loomis spoke decently about him at the end of the year at his end of season press conference. So I'm sure he won some people over. Remember, if Spencer Rattler hits, everyone in that building feels like, hey, we're geniuses. We drafted Spencer Rattler. But he makes their lives easier. It would be cheaper on the salary cap, and you'd feel a little bit better about your situation. Justin to Get Me Cash says, with a super chat, says Tillman Fertitta or Todd Graves will save us. First off, thank you for the support. Second, Tillman Fertitta did say that he's interested in buying the Saints for whatever that's worth. He put that out there months ago. So, I mean, we'll see what happens, but he did put that out there. Hope Moore gives Spencer Rattler a chance. Really want to see him succeed. I mean, yeah, I would love it. I think it is, to me, the situation where that would expedite the Saints rebuild if Rattler ends up being a good quarterback. We don't know if he can be. We don't know if he will be, but maybe they'll give him the shot. I want Philly to lose too. Yeah, I don't like the Eagles, so I can't in good faith root for them. Jerry says, I want Kansas City to lose. Totally understandable. 99 Dog says, tank for Arch. I don't know if I'm wrong here, but I feel like there's not a guarantee Arch declares for next year's draft. And maybe I'm wrong, but if Arch has a solid season and wants to come back for one more year, he's getting paid well with NIL anyway. I can see him going back for one more year. The Mannings have really preached development, being in Sarkisian system. So who knows? But I get why people will say tank for Arch. I totally get it. David Nola 985 says, best case is Lauscher retires and Mickey takes his job opening the GM position. It's possible. I feel like that segue could eventually happen. But if he butchers his hire, I really do believe we might get to the point where the Saints say, hey, no more. Enough's enough. So I'll get into any more comments you guys have. So if you have any thoughts, suggestions, rants, drop them in, and I'll get to all of those. Before I do that, though, want to get a quick word from DraftKings Sportsbook.
This ain't the little itty-bitty teeny-tiny bowl. This is Super Bowl 59. Get in on the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of Super Bowl 59. Scoring touchdowns is key to hoisting the Vince Lombardi Trophy, and you have a shot to score big by betting on them at DraftKings Sportsbook, the #1 place to bet touchdowns. New DraftKings customers can bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code BOOT That's code BOOT, BOOT, for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets instantly when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook. The crown is yours.
Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 and over. Age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in New Hampshire, Oregon, and Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. NFL Plus premium offer available only to new and former NFL Plus subscribers. Additional NFL Plus premium terms at nfl.com/terms.
Once again, thank you to DraftKings Sportsbook for being part of the program. We greatly appreciate it here at Boot Crew Media. Going to keep it rolling here on the Straight Up Saints podcast. Any other comments we got? Let's go through them. Nat says, I hope they trade Derek Carr and go with Spencer, then we get Manning from Texas. I don't believe they'll be able to trade Derek Carr personally. I think they'd have to cut him if that is the case. And we'll see. Look, if they go the Spencer Rattler route, I do believe there will be some potential there. There'll be some excitement of the unknown and what he could be. But we just don't know. We don't know yet. As for Arch, I think that I won't go into whether or not Arch can be the guy because we still have to see Arch start for a full year, you know? Go with Rattler. If he doesn't pan out, go get your quarterback in 2026. Simple. I think it makes the most sense for sure. But then, but then you have to be patient with Kellen. Obviously, you got to make sure next year you're not putting all the chips in one basket, nor should they, because this team is not built to win right now. And if they do practice and preach patience, I think that would be a good thing. But you have to have decent enough results in 2025. They can't look like a flat-out train wreck and go like 3-14. It's got to be a little bit better to have more trust. But I can see them going that route with what you mentioned. Just play Rattler and then draft your guy. JW says, with the recent news that just broke out about the Saints in the Archdiocese, is Kellen Moore even looking at the Saints as an option? I do believe so. Again, I think it comes down to you don't know when you're going to get another head coaching offer. You just don't. You'd imagine you will because you're in your mid-30s and you are a good offensive coordinator, but the NFL is a cruel world and shit changes in a hurry. So I just would not be surprised if he says strike while the iron's hot. And I would get it. I would totally get it if that's what he decides to do. No, there is now division between Mrs. Benson and Mickey Loomis. Major divide. It feels like we have reached that point. It's not the way it used to be, in my opinion. I think there's a little bit more friction. Rattler's got to work on his middle of the field accuracy ASAP, or he'll be out of the league by 2027. I do agree with that. I think there are plays that Rattler makes from just an arm talent perspective. They'd be like, wow, that's a great throw. And then there are throws that he just can't make. And I think what I mentioned throughout the season was not every throw has to be a fastball, because when you're layering throws, that comes down to touch. That doesn't come down to velocity. And if you can get that down, he will become a better quarterback for sure. I think from an arm talent perspective, he is super intriguing, but you got to be able to layer your throws. You got to be able to attack the middle of the field. And I think if we can do that, we'll see. Now, I'm not opposed to Spencer starting a whole year. I've made that very clear. So if it ever feels like I'm anti-Rattler, I'm okay with them starting Rattler for a whole year. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You probably get to draft a quarterback. And if it does work, all right, us Saints fans are going to feel optimism for the first time in a long time. But we'll see where they go. 99 Dog says, who can we draft this year to become an impact player, someone to build around? Look, I think you're going to have options when you're picking ninth, right? Especially if we have Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward go in the top 7-ish. I believe you're going to see this team be able to get a blue chip prospect, whether that is a Mason Graham, whether that is a Will Johnson, which ironically enough, either Michigan dude would be a playmaker for this team. McMillan from Arizona, someone that everyone likes for sure. Will Campbell might not be the sexy pick, but man, Saints can bolster in the trenches. Maybe that'd make them a little bit stronger. So there'll be options. I know fans have mentioned Ashton Genty. I don't think that's going to happen. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. Brian says Ty Warren. Look, I love Warren's game. I don't know if that would be considered a luxury pick for the Saints, but I think that for the Saints, that's probably where they won't go. But we'll see what happens. I think that I think for the Saints, they probably won't go tight end in the first round. And maybe I'm wrong, but Tyler Warren is a hell of a player, no doubt about it. And he does fit that blue chip prospect that the Saints need. Because that's a big problem I have for the New Orleans Saints right now. when you look at this team, they don't got a lot of blue chip guys, right? Like, I love Olave, but he has injury concerns. I think Brian Brzez's a heck of a pass rusher, but he needs to get better as a run defender. I thought Fuaga looked good as a rookie, but again, only a rookie. There's not a lot of blue chip prospects on this team. Brandon says, do you think the type of news coming out about the Saints will force Gayle Benson to sell the team? I mentioned this before, Brandon, and I'll kind of share the same sentiment. I don't know if right now, today, this story will be enough for the Saints to get pressure and Gayle Benson to leave. What I will say, though, is that when it comes to New Orleans, if things like this start to mount, this is where you get to that point. I remember the Commanders had like God knows how many scandals before it was like, okay, we're selling the team and the NFL is kicking you out. I don't know if the NFL would kick out Gayle Benson at this time because they've known about this scandal for the last like 4 or 5 years. This isn't new news. And I believe there is a close connection between Gayle Benson and Roger Goodell. There is mutual respect there. There's not a bunch of animosity like there is with Dan Snyder when he left the Commanders. Does that mean I defend the Saints hiding, trying to help the church cover the way they had a sexual abuse scandal? Absolutely not. This is disgusting and it's wrong. It's just flat out wrong. And there's no reason a professional sports organization should offer any advice or help soften the blow. She just shouldn't. Do I believe that this is going to make them sell, though? Probably not. At least not right now. Swamp Saints 57 says, gotta imagine we'll try to trade up in the draft. Even at 9, this team always wants to go higher. Yeah, that's why I laughed when Mickey Loomis tells the media, we love draft picks. We'd love to have more of them. No, you don't. No, you don't. You always trade up, dude. You always trade up. So I kind of laugh when he says shit like that. Brian says we need a playmaker. And we need a playmaker. We need explosive plays. I agree. There's not enough on this offense right now. Shaheed, explosive. Olave, explosive. Alvin's a great playmaker. They need a guy and you mentioned Ty Warren before. I don't think they'll do that because I think at 9, they probably go with someone who's in the trenches probably, or maybe Will Johnson if he's there at 9, because I think Will Johnson's a heck of a player. I think that a guy like Tyler Warren who can eat the middle of the field up and take that pressure off Olave so he doesn't have to attack the middle of the field, and Shaheed obviously can still be your vertical guy. To me, that's where you start developing elements of a really, really good foundation for an offensive team. But I just don't know what route they'll go. Japanese Hercules says, would love for the Saints to trade back to 12 to 15 range with a team who wants Genty so we get an extra second rounder. Any of the solid edge rushers we need should still be on the board in the 12 to 15 range. In theory, I do love the idea of the Saints trading back because I think when you have this many roster holes, right, they need offensive linemen, they need defensive linemen, I mentioned defensive linemen, then you need 2 D tackles probably and a defensive end. You might need another linebacker. Definitely need a safety. Could use another cornerback. Could use a tight end. Could use another offensive lineman in the interior. Their guard play's not good enough. And honestly, I think their guard play's one of their weaknesses. Need another receiver. Need a quarterback. Need a running back. Saints got holes everywhere. So I agree. If you could trade back and get more picks, you probably need to do this. Hope Kellen does move on from that quarterback. I believe he will. If you're talking about Derek Carr, I believe he will. And maybe I'm misled and misguided on how I believe he'll view this situation. But I think he will move on from Derek Carr. I think there's just a situation there where he doesn't love the quarterback room, and understandably so. So I do believe he will move on from Derek Carr. And it'll be fascinating to see what happens if he does that. Because if you move on from Derek Carr, are you going the draft route? Are you playing Spencer Rattler and then reassessing in 2026? I don't think there's necessarily a wrong way to do this. I think it comes down to how you feel about your options and who you like the best out of that bunch. But it's going to be interesting times. I think Saints fans are going to be really engaged with the Super Bowl because your potential next head coach is running the offense of the Eagles. So there is a little bit of I don't want to say something to play for, but there is an interest there. And I won't even say rooting interest because you don't need to want the Eagles to win. You just might want their offense to look good. And Kellen Moore do a good job coaching against Steve Spagnuolo. And how he handles his offense against Steve Spagnuolo, by the way, is going to be a great test for him, right? Brandon says just cut Carr and go get Justin Fields to compete with Rattler for the starting job. In my opinion, if you are signing Justin Fields, you're signing him to play him for that year because he's not going to be a $1 million quarterback. It's going to be anywhere from that $5 to $10 million range. So if you're going to spend that as opposed to Rattler, who's on a rookie salary getting paid peanuts, I think you're signing him to start him. I don't think you're signing him for a quarterback competition. So we'll see. Hope we draft the offensive tackle from LSU. Kid's got nice footwork and feet placement. I am not opposed to the Saints just continuing to build up that O-line. The problem is they got to start hitting on these picks. Got to start hitting on it. But if Fuaga is the real deal like he looked this past season, and Penning develops a little bit more, if the Saints can get better guard play, this O-line could start to become a wrecking crew. But they got to fix that guard play for me. I really feel like that is one of the weaknesses of this team is the interior. And Ruiz has not been good enough, and left guard's been a revolving door the last couple seasons. So the Saints are going to have to get better at offensive line for sure. I know fans don't want to see them continue going offensive line picks, but they kind of have to. Brandon says, wouldn't be surprised if Moore chooses to draft a wide receiver at 9. I mean, look, the Saints still need another wide receiver. I would not be opposed to them doing that. I know McMillan's been a popular pick to kind of throw towards the Saints' direction at pick 9, and he does intrigue me. I'm not officially sold on him yet, but he does intrigue me. I mean, the build is there. He's a big-bodied guy. Obviously, the production in Arizona was astounding this past season. I still have a couple of hesitations, though, but I do think he is a damn good player. But I don't know if the Saints will go with him at 9. I wouldn't be surprised, though. The Saints do need, another wide receiver in the room, I guess, to build up, especially a guy who could dominate the middle of the field. I think that's important. Did you see the latest news? Saints involved in the Catholic Church abuse cover-up. Moore ain't coming to New Orleans. I don't know about the Moore part. Also, while we're at it, I mentioned Todd Downing earlier today, maybe being an option for the Saints staff. He just got hired by the Patriots, so we could take him off the board if Kellen Moore's the coach. We can take him off the board. As for this comment you mentioned with Kellen Moore, I still think he's going to be the next head coach of the Saints. So we'll see. Walter says, Chris, did you just say you're not sold on Ted McMillan? Drop your addy right now. I'm just saying, sometimes there's receivers who I have been super high on and they didn't work out in the NFL. He could end up being a star, and I think he's probably been the most fun. All right, not most fun. Let's just for a second take out Ryan Williams and Jeremiah Smith because they're not draft eligible. If we take them out, McMillan's probably been the receiver I've had the most fun watching this year. I still, though, sometimes get concerned about these huge-ass wide receivers if they're going to shine in the NFL, because I remember being burnt by, what the fuck was his name? Dorial Green Beckham? Or I can't remember the Missouri wide receiver. So I've been burned before by like a taller wide receiver that I felt like could have been an NFL star. Granted, McMillan's production was way better. So that's why I think it's more so trauma. But McMillan's a damn good player. And if the Saints draft him, don't get me wrong, I will be excited. And I probably will post some of those ridiculous clips that he's had because the dude's an athletic freak. Jerry says, man, bump all the news about the church scandal, sign Kellen Moore as Saints head coach now. I mean, they can. I mean, if they were to have an agreement right now, they'd get hit with a loss of draft picks and a fine. So we know the Saints can't afford to lose any draft picks there. Jerry says, Saints need to start winning games. Forget all the distractions going on now. Yeah, look, I'd love to say that's the case. I think they're going to keep losing more before they get back to winning. And it might be a while before they get back to winning. That's just the truth of the matter. But I agree with the sentiment, Jerry. It's a little frustrating that we've reached this point with the Saints where most of the time when we're doing live streams and we're tweeting and do whatever, it is always bad news at this point. One Smoke says, I want Carter from Penn State. He should be first on the Saints draft board. Yeah, look, I'd love Abdul Carter too, but Abdul Carter's not making it out of the top 4, in my opinion. I can't see him making it out of the top 4. Honestly, I could see him going number 1 if the Titans say, hey, we're not sold on the quarterback. They have preached building from the trenches, and getting an Abdul Carter who's going to be a premier pass rusher would fit that description. Who cares about this right now? Luka got traded. Yeah, that's kind of been on my mind for the last 2 days. No doubt about it. I was watching a movie on Saturday night, and I just look at my phone, and I'm like, what the fuck is this? Because you know what it is, right? When you start looking on Twitter a lot, your brain's just kind of programmed to always just like aimlessly scroll through stuff. And I saw the trade. I looked at it twice. I was like, this got to be fake. And I saw ESPN put out the graphic after Shams reported it. And I was like, okay, let me look again. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, I just couldn't believe that Luka Doncic in the prime of his career at this age got traded when you're a season removed from him leading to the finals. I could not fathom it. I could not fathom it all. I still can't fathom it. It makes no fucking sense to me. And the negative PR that the Mavericks has pushed, oh, the conditioning concerns me. Okay, I could argue he wasn't in great shape last year. They still made the finals. Oh, we're worried about giving him a supermax. That's dumb. That is a supermax worthy player. They have all the negative PR, but it's not going to change the fact that I've never been more surprised by a trade in my life. And I've been surprised by trades before, right? Like some trades happen where we're like, holy shit, didn't see this coming. I have never been more shocked and more confused by a trade than this one. To me, it makes no sense. It's great for the NBA because the NBA's ratings have kind of been down this year. And I think having something like this where it's so shocking, you can bet your ass people are going to want to watch the Lakers games moving forward, right? But I still can't believe this. And the media today going out there going, oh, I got the Mavericks as the best team now in the West. Charles Barkley and Stephen A. Smith saying that. I don't get it. I understand the idea of a Kyrie and Anthony Davis pairing could be really, really good for the short term. I get that. But it's still Luka freaking Doncic, right? Like, I know he's missed games with that calf injury he's had, and I get that. But they just made the fucking finals because of this dude. And then you trade him. I don't know. I'll never understand it. Sorry for my brief rant about Luka, but I don't get it. One Smoke says, would you trade up for Abdul Carter? It all comes down to cost, but you're probably, where the Saints are picking, you're probably moving a really premier pick. So it's tough. I think Abdul Carter's a can't miss prospect though. So if you feel like if they felt like pass rusher was the missing link, sure. But they got so many needs. So maybe no is where I'm kind of at right now. Send Caesar Salad Ruiz packing. The guy is just horrible in protection. I agree. I like the nickname. Brandon says it seems like the Saints have become the poster child of the NFL when it comes to controversy, man. Yeah, it was the Commanders. Now they've sold, so they're in the glory now with Jaden Daniels. It might be the Saints, man. Saints or Jets? Saints or Jets, probably. More picks the Saints have, the better. I agree. They have a lot of roster needs right now, and I think you just got to accumulate draft picks and see what you can do. And we'll see what happens, but I think when you get more draft picks, there's more bites at the apple, and I think for the Saints, they're going to need that. They're going to need more chances on draft picks and hoping some of these hits because you want to build this football team in Kellen Moore's image. So I think that's where you're at. I low-key don't mind Carr. We've been pretty good every time he started. We can manage another season with him. Look, if they end up going another season with Derek Carr, it's fine. I'll live with it. I'm not gonna go manic because Derek Carr is starting another season. And to your point, he's been okay when he starts. He's not a bad quarterback, and I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just think he's in that class of, the Geno Smiths of the world, although I think Geno's been a better quarterback the last 2 years by a pretty good margin. But he's in that category of 20th best quarterback, 21st best quarterback, whatever. So your ceiling's not elevated with him. But I do agree. He's a fine quarterback. If they have to play another season with him, we can live with it. I just don't know if the Saints want to go that route, especially with the new head coach. Brandon says, if we trade Penning, what can we get for him? I don't know. I don't know if I'm trading Penning, by the way. I just don't. What I will say, though, for anyone worried about Penning, let's just have a little bit more patience. I thought he played a lot better this year. So I think that, to me, is a good sign that he was able to take some steps in the right direction and actually look like an NFL player. The Eagles, with Mekhi Becton, who, by the way, started his career as an offensive tackle for the Jets, former first-round pick, big dude, super athletic, just was getting hurt, though, and wasn't playing well when he was on the field. He has now played guard for Philly, and he's looked great for the Eagles as a guard. So who knows? Maybe the Saints can go that route with Penning if offensive tackle doesn't work. But I think he made enough improvements this past season, especially in the run game, that I think the Saints will probably give him one more stab at offensive tackle. Tanner says, I think Kellen Moore will draft Warren or Ashton Genty. Possibly. We don't have much of a choice. We're stuck with Carr, and he's stuck with us. For now, it feels that way. Every time an allegation comes out, everyone knows that dude is a future Cleveland Brown. LOL, not thrilled with the Saints controversy, but we're definitely not alone. I mean, yeah, look, the Deshaun Watson thing was horrible. Justin Tucker's obviously been in a real pickle at this moment right now with what he's put himself in. And for the Saints, again, I'm not defending it. It is impossible to defend what they did. What I can say in this moment, though, is unfortunately, this story's been out. I think the first time it broke was 5 years ago. And we knew the Saints have been involved with the church in this degree. So I am not stunned. Am I disgusted? Yeah, I'm as disgusted as the day when you find out because it shouldn't happen. But I'm not stunned because we knew the Saints were involved in this. Brandon says, I doubt Moore is leaving Philly to work with Carr. I want to see what Rattler can do. Maybe he'd want to see what Rattler can do. Maybe he'd want to draft a quarterback. But I understand the Carr part, right? Like, that's not a selling point to go there. One Smoke says, I think Penning earns another chance, and he should. And he should get another chance. Cody says, the Jets haven't had a scandal that could lead to criminal charges like the Saints. And Commanders, the scandals are just stupid shit about who's making their roster and depth chart decisions. I will agree on that part, sure. But the Jets are more like stupidity that isn't harmful, right? Like the owner becoming the ambassador for Trump, or the owner's kid saying, hey, the Madden rating's not good on this guy, we shouldn't trade for him, or the Jets firing Robert Saleh after 5 games thinking that's going to do something and it just makes you worse. So yeah, I agree with that. It's not like actual criminal shit, but they are a mess all the time. But those two teams are always a mess, unfortunately. The quarterback position is the one most scrutinized, but I don't think it's anywhere near our biggest priority. The quality of the squad around the quarterback matters so much more. Yeah, that's why everyone has said, hey, look, if the quarterback's there at 9, do you take him? I don't know. Like, I think the Saints are built right now where, like, if you draft a rookie quarterback high, right? Let's say you take one at 9. So you take a quarterback at 9. They're probably going to be in a really shit spot and struggle because this roster's not built to thrive right now. Where there's other rosters where you kind of pluck that quarterback in and they're ready to go. Like, it's not that bad of a team. You know, I don't think their roster's bad. They did struggle this year. The Bears had the roster for Caleb Williams. The coaching staff wasn't up to par. That's what you want, right? Saints right now, for me, they got a lot of openings and a lot of holes on this roster. So if you pluck a rookie quarterback and drop him there, going to struggle. Brandon says, are there any players on the Saints that you would be willing to move on from? I mean, easy ones would be like Jamal Williams, those guys where, like, at least you get some relief and it's not a big dead cap. But the rest of their guys, if you look at the way they've structured this roster, they're going to have to do their annual restructures anyway. They can't really just cut guys and gain a lot from it. So, unfortunately, the answer is going to be no. The ownership group is so insulated and tone deaf, nothing will happen. They'll just let this blow over, probably. Look at the Eagles. Hurts isn't a world-class quarterback, but look at their lines. The O-line and D-line is absolutely world-class. It is. And look, ideally, that's what you want, right? You're not – the way I look at the NFL guys, there are 4 quarterbacks who are better than everyone else. Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar, Joe Burrow. They're just better than everyone else. And if you don't have one of those 4 guys, your best bet is probably building a really good roster and hoping you have one of those Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy's, Dak Prescott's. You're hoping you have one of those guys with a stacked roster, and maybe you can win. Eagles and Niners have gotten awfully close. They haven't done it yet, but they've gotten awfully close. But if you don't have one of those 4 quarterbacks, and you don't think you have a generational prospect who can just lift your franchise, you're probably trying to build your roster out a little bit, you know? Not everyone's going to be able to be like Washington, where you draft Jaden Daniels and all of a sudden you're in a great spot. You know, it's very tough. You don't get lucky like that often. So, yeah. Brandon says, did you hear Chris Canty say that Burrow is an elite quarterback? Yeah, Chris Canty just says shit now for the sake of it. I don't believe he believes what he's saying. I think he just says shit for the love of making bad takes because he knows that's where sports media kind of is. That's just what I'm thinking personally. And to say Joe Burrow is not an elite quarterback after what he did this year, and to say, well, we can't keep giving the runner-up to the runner-up to the runner-up. You can have multiple elite quarterbacks in the NFL. There was a time where Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Aaron Rodgers were all playing elite football because you could have multiple elite quarterbacks. So I think right now the NFL, Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar, Joe Burrow, those are the elites. Which positions would you prioritize in the first 3 rounds? Let's see. Definitely defensive line. I think they got to get defensive linemen. I think that is a major need for this team. I'm not opposed to them going with a playmaker offensively, whether that's wide receiver, running back, tight end. I'm not opposed to it. And honestly, I'm also not opposed to them going O-line at some point. So that's where I'm at. The one that would make me change my mind, though, is if they're picking 9th and Will Johnson's there, I think you just draft Will Johnson. I think it'd be similar to like when you took Lattimore in 2017, where it's like, it's kind of a no-brainer pick. It's an easy pick to make. But again, it all comes down. What do you do with Paulson Adebo in free agency? And you know, where do you go from there? So I definitely think O-line in the interior, they got to get better guard play. They got to get better play from the defensive line, especially defensive tackle. And, I really, really, really do like the idea of them adding another playmaker. But like I said before, if you're picking 9, and I think I tweeted this last week, if you're picking 9 and Will Johnson is there, how the hell do you say no? Because he's too good. In my opinion, he's one of those picks that you make and you feel very comfortable he's going to be a Pro Bowler for you. Any sneaky good free agents we get on a friendly deal? I haven't looked yet. I'll look into the free agency market as we get a little bit closer. I'm waiting for the Saints to just freaking finalize this damn staff and go from there, because that to me is what you got to do. You got to get through this staff and hope to God we get this done. But I'll look into it. I'll definitely look into it. I think we'll have to look at Kellen Moore's background. I'll tell you this, though. One guy, and I'm not saying he is a great player, but I would not be surprised if the Saints say, hey, if he's cheap, we'll just add him. I believe Kenneth Gainwell is a free agent after this year. 25 years old, just played in Kellen Moore's system. He is a solid backup running back. Maybe that's someone they might want to add, because I'd imagine you're getting rid of Jamal Williams. We can't trust Kendre Miller. We just can't trust him to stay healthy. So I wouldn't mind if they get Kenneth Gainwell. I think he'd be a nice little third down running back for them. Brandon says, my top 5 quarterbacks that most NFL fans would love to have are Mahomes, Allen, Jackson, Burrow, and Hurts. That's my definition of elite quarterbacks. I don't know if I put Jalen Hurts as elite, but man, when you surround him with the right talent, this is the result you're going to get. Second Super Bowl appearance in the last 3 seasons. So he is a winner. I always thought Justin Herbert would be the 5th guy, and I love Justin Herbert, but he struggles in the playoffs, and it is a little bit of a concern. Who's the new coach for the Saints? Do you want McCarthy? It's going to be Kellen Moore. Unless Kellen Moore shocks the NFL world and backs out now, it's going to be him. Speaking of, by the way, some breaking news not involving the Saints. Myles Garrett has just requested a trade, so we'll see where he ends up. But he just put out a whole statement saying that he wants out from Cleveland. Another franchise that's not in a good spot, Is Jeff Stoutland a potential staff poach with Moore? We'll see. Look, right now, he's got 2 titles under his belt with O-line coach and run game coordinator. I think for him, it depends. I think either him or Nussmeier is probably the guy that Kellen Moore brings with him as his OC. Maybe I'm wrong. I think that's one of the picks. But Stoutland would be a nice one, man. Stoutland would be a nice one. He's what he's done with that Eagles O-line. Obviously, the talent's there, but he's coached them up pretty damn well. And for him, he's been in that building since 2018. I'd imagine Sirianni wouldn't want to lose him, though. Because who knows? Maybe Philly could just internally promote him. Maybe that's what they would want. Cornerback need depth there. I like the idea of Will Johnson. So do I. I think Will Johnson is a hell of a player. Hell of a player. And I think for the Saints, if you don't sign Paulson Adebo back, you absolutely need to get a cornerback. If you do, maybe it makes the need not as bad. But yeah. Brandon says, I wish we could get Myles Garrett. Me too. Doesn't fit the timeline, though. Doesn't really make sense for this team. But nice to see the NFL is always, churning out content, man. Always churning out. There's always something. Myles Garrett's a great player, though, and I can't wait to see where he ends up. I'd love to see him play for a contender. He's just a super, super talented dude, and he's paid his dues in Cleveland. I wonder if you trade Myles Garrett, though, you're signaling rebuild. Is the quarterback the draft pick at number 2? We'll see. And if you're Kevin Stefanski, are you going to be able to have a long leash with that rookie quarterback, though? That's going to be a question for Cleveland. But it's going to be so fascinating. And obviously, that's going to dictate what the Saints happen, right? If there's an early run on quarterbacks, guys like Will Johnson, guys like Mason Graham, they'll get pushed down the board a little bit. And maybe they'll open up a chance for the Saints to get a really, really good prospect at pick 9, which is what they're going to need because, man, they need talented players on this team. But right now, the focus is on the Saints, what happens with this team in terms of building through Kellen Moore's image, and that'll be the focus. Margaret says Myles would be good for Detroit. I think it would, but I think obviously with Aiden Hutchinson there, they'll feel comfortable. Brandon mentioned the Commanders. They got money to spend. I think that might be a spot. They could use a defensive end to really bolster Dan Quinn's defense. So who knows? You might have cracked the code. Maybe that's where he ends up. But we'll see what happens with the Saints. The focus right now is on Kellen Moore. If he takes the job, I believe he will personally. But obviously the Saints don't make anything easy with them getting involved in this scandal and obviously being at the center of the worst story in the NFL this week. So We'll see what happens in New Orleans. We'll have more content throughout the week, though. We'll probably have another podcast later this week. We'll definitely have stuff going up next Monday because Kellen Moore and the Saints will have another meeting next Monday, and there's a good chance the deal gets finalized there. So if that goes down, you know where you can find us here at Boot Crew Media. So make sure to subscribe to the channel. Really, really appreciate you guys giving, your thoughts and comments. So you guys have been excellent. I'll get through any other ones you guys have here, and then we'll wrap things up. Draft LSU offensive tackle ASAP. Again, like I mentioned, guys, would not mind if they keep going in the trenches. And look, coming into last year, I felt like Will Campbell would be a can't-miss prospect. So if that's what they end up doing and they go with Will Campbell, I'm cool with it. If they go later on with Emory Jones, also cool with it. We'll see what they do. Do you think we have a good year coming up? My friend's an Eagles fan, and I'm losing my mind. Do I think the Saints will be successful next year? Probably not. I don't. But maybe they'll be fun. You can be a fun, competitive, bad team that's taking the right steps towards building. Remember, the Dan Campbell Lions first year struggled in the beginning, played really good football towards the end, bad record, went to 9-8 the next year, missed the playoffs, but you saw the build, and then NFC Championship the third year. So things can be a progress, but when you have the right coach, you'll see the steps in the right direction. And hopefully this for the Saints, Kellen Moore is the right coach that can get them back on track because we've been through a lot of losing, and I think a lot of us are kind of tired of being through all this losing. So we'll see what happens in New Orleans. Kellen Moore is the favorite for the job. We'll see if he ends up accepting it next Monday when they meet. Regardless of result, we'll have you covered here on the Straight Up Saints podcast, the destination for the Who Dat Nation. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. We'll be back with more here at Boot Crew Media.